Truth be told, I never graduated from college, and this is the closest I've ever gotten to a college graduation. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. Yes?
Mr. Jobs, you're a bright and influential man.
Here it comes.
It's sad and clear that on several counts you've discussed, you don't know what you're talking about. I would like, for example, for you to express in clear terms how, say, Java, in any of its incarnations, addresses the ideas embodied in OpenDoc. And when you're finished with that, perhaps you could tell us what you personally have been doing for the last 7 years.
You know, you can please some of the people some of the time, but one of the hardest things when you're trying to affect change is that people like this gentleman are right in some areas. I'm sure that there are some things OpenDoc does, probably even more that I'm not familiar with, that nothing else out there does. And I'm sure that you can make some demos, maybe a small commercial app that demonstrates those things. The hardest thing is, how does that fit in to a cohesive, larger vision that's going to allow you to sell $8 billion, $10 billion of product a year? And one of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that. And I think that's the right path to take. I remember with the laser writer, we built the world's first small laser printers, you know. And there was awesome technology in that box. We had the first Canon laser printing, cheap laser printing engine in the world, in the United States here at Apple. We had a very wonderful printer controller that we designed. We had Adobe's PostScript software in there. We had AppleTalk in there. Just awesome technology in the box. And I remember seeing the first printout come out of it and just picking it up and looking at it and thinking, you know, we can sell this. Because you don't have to know anything about what's in that box. All we have to do is hold this up and go, do you want this? And if you can remember back to 1984, before laser printers, it was pretty startling to see that. People went, whoa, yes. And that's where Apple's got to get back to. And, you know, I'm sorry that OpenDoc's a casualty along the way, and I readily admit there are many things in life that I don't have the faintest idea what I'm talking about. So I apologize for that too. But there's a whole lot of people working super, super hard right now at Apple. You know, Avi, John, Garino, Fred. I mean, the whole team is working, burning the midnight oil, trying to, and people, you know, hundreds of people below them, to execute on some of these things, and they're doing their best. And I think that what we need to do, and some mistakes will be made, by the way. Some mistakes will be made along the way. That's good, because at least some decisions are being made along the way. And we'll find the mistakes, we'll fix them. And I think what we need to do is support that team. going through this very important stage as they work their butts off. They're all getting calls, being offered 3 times as much money to go do this, do that, the valley's hot, and none of them are leaving. And I think we need to support them and see them through this and write some damn good applications to support Apple out in the market. That's my own point of view. Mistakes will be made. Some people will be pissed off. Some people will not know what they're talking about. But I think it is so much better than where things were not very long ago. And I think we're going to get there.
You founded this company 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Tell them how old you were.
I was 19. I was 9 years old when I wrote this, and it begins, "Dear Daddy, what I want out of life is to discover something new, something that mankind didn't know was possible. I also want to study about man and his ways. Life is really interesting. I love being with you. It's my most favorite thing in the whole world. Love, Elizabeth." I wanted to do something with my life that people thought was impossible before. This used to be my advisor's office, and I would sit here, literally here in the hallway, waiting for him to come back to his office to try to convince him to let me into his graduate research program. And I think I probably spent the equivalent of months just sitting on the floor here. My family was amazing. I'll be grateful all my life. I called them and informed them that I would be leaving Stanford, and they let me take the money that they both had saved working all their lives for my brother and I to be able to go to college and put it into starting the company. We used to come up with concepts of companies that we would build together when we were like 2 and 4 with little stuffed animals or Lego blocks and all this kind of stuff. He's always been my very best friend.
The kind of determination that she had from such a young age around what she wanted to do and the level of focus that she set, that has stayed true for her.
A healthcare pioneer is being compared to visionaries Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Elizabeth Holmes, her mission is to allow blood testing at a fraction of Medicare costs, and made Holmes the world's youngest female self-made billionaire.
We're living in a country in which it's illegal in many states for people to even get access to their own health information. This summer, the FDA cleared one of our first finger stick tests that replaces the need for people to have big vials of blood taken from their arm. When people get access to their own health information, they can begin to see the onset of disease in time to do something about it.
If a female leader can build a company from nothing to something that impacts people's lives every single day, it's like there's nothing we can't do.
We need to create a stereotype that little girls can be the best in science and math and engineering, and I think it starts when you're 2, and it comes down to, at Christmas time, are you getting the Barbie dolls or are you getting the Legos? Our dream for Theranos is that every single day, someone's life is better because they can afford access to health information they couldn't afford before, and they begin to get tested in time to improve outcomes.
Elizabeth, if you wrote a book, what would you write on the dedication page?
I would write that it's to the people who've had to say goodbye too soon to people they love.
Aww.
I believe the individual is the answer to the challenges of healthcare. But we can't engage the individual in changing outcomes unless individuals have access to the information they need to do so. The right to protect the health and well-being of every person, of those we love, is a basic human right. A right defined in the United Nations Universal Declaration on Human Rights. Yet in the United States today, healthcare is the leading cause of bankruptcy, and the lack of it, the leading cause of the suffering associated with finding out too late in the disease progression process that someone you love is really, really sick. I grew up spending summers and the holidays with my uncle. I remember his love of crossword puzzles and trying to teach us to play football. I remember how much he loved the beach. I remember how much I loved him. He was diagnosed one day with skin cancer, which all of a sudden was brain cancer.
So Elizabeth Holmes was speaking like Obama.
Churchill and Roosevelt had their differences. They were keen observers of each other's blind spots and shortcomings, if not always their own. And they were hard-headed about their ability to remake the world.
Absolutely. I think the first step is engagement of the individual, because engagement of the individual on the one hand brings understanding and therefore knowledge, and then the ability to change behavior. And on the other hand, the engagement of the individual means the beginning of an understanding on pricing. And the more that
Saying, and not just like that cadence, but speaking with an extremely deep voice, baritone. She's picked up that baritone from somewhere. She's probably earlier in her life, she's seen somebody that has a voice like that that's very politically successful and influential, and she's copied that person's voice. It's also known just purely in psychology that deeper voices command more respect. So she didn't want to speak with a high voice of a girl. She wanted to affect a deep baritone voice. So she's copying someone. We don't know who, but she's copying someone. She's mimicking someone's baritone voice to achieve a desired outcome in influencing whoever she's speaking to, getting her way, manipulating people. So yeah, William Shatner's cadence is there, and Barack Obama's inflection is there. How Obama kind of turns up his words at the end of the words. I don't know that I can do it. I'll give it a shot. So if I'm being Barack Obama, I'm turning up my words at the end of my words, and I'm emphasizing the last word, and that's how I speak. That's kind of how Obama does, and you can frequently see her mimicking elements of Obama's speech pattern. She mimics the speech pattern of political powerful leaders and superstars and things like that. So I really have to drive home this point that she is sometimes copying Obama's way of speaking. And these seem like very little things, and they seem like they're innocuous. They seem like they're just nothing to the untrained eye. But what they actually are is they're a psychopath or a narcissist mimicking somebody that they want to mimic. So they do mimic something that they do. They mimic for different reasons. But one of the main main reasons is that their personality doesn't exist, and so they have to actually create a personality. And so when they're thinking, how am I going to create a personality, they look around them and they go, well, I want to be a powerful business leader, and I want to be well known to people in a positive way. So I'm going to start copying William Shatner out of Star Trek, because everyone knows him, but particularly the old boomers know him, not so much the younger generation. I'm going to start copying Barack Obama, because at the time Obama was in the news all the time. Obama's not the president now, but back then Obama was the president, and so she was copying him so that her way of speaking was readily identifiable as his. She's basically becoming who she wants to become by copying them. And once she's copied them enough, she's become them. So it's a subconscious thing to most of you. 99% of you won't pick up on it. Actually, a lot of you will pick up that she sounds like Darth Vader, or that she sounds like Obama, or that she sounds like William Shatner. A lot of you will pick up on she looks like, sometimes she looks like the guy that owns Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg. Sometimes she appears like Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook. She appears like him sometimes. And the big one, of course, is Steve Jobs of Apple. Most of you, even listen, I come across a lot of people that are skeptical or just downright call me crazy when I point out the antics of, excuse me, the usual reaction from normies when I point out the antics of narcissists, sociopaths and psychopaths is to denounce me as crazy. They think I'm crazy. They think everything that I'm saying is BS. Mostly it's because they haven't been taught this stuff in school, and because they're not taught it in school and because they don't see it on the TV, it's beyond their experience. But if you're a scientist and you look closely at psychopaths, you'll see what I see. And anyone and everyone can be a scientist. You just have to observe with your eyes and ears and see what's going on, and then try and figure out what you're seeing. And particularly you're looking at patterns of behavior in psychology. If you can discover patterns, you can discover the psychology of an individual. So we can see patterns with Elizabeth Holmes. The biggest, most obvious pattern is that she's got that deep voice, and also the biggest, most obvious pattern concurrently with the deep voice is her mimicry of Steve Jobs. She's mimicking Steve Jobs like so hard, so it's cringe so much. Steve Jobs with the black skivvy, Elizabeth Holmes with the black skivvy. Even down to really small things that, again, you would say, oh, that's nothing. No, it's her mimicking Steve Jobs. Like Steve Jobs would stand on stage and he would pull something out of his jeans pocket, and Elizabeth Holmes would stand on stage and she'd pull something out of her jeans pocket or out of her pants pocket. That's not a coincidence. That's not nothing. That's not something to skip over and not look at. That's the essence of what a psychopath is. They're mimicking and copying the people around them. They're not just copying anyone, though. They'll usually copy the people that they want to appear like. And the other reason why they'll copy people is if they have a target, that they're a victim that they're targeting, they will mimic the victim. So they don't always copy people that are high status that they want to be like. Sometimes they mimic their victim in the same way that a spider sometimes mimics its prey before it strikes. For example, there are some spiders that appear just like an ant, and these spiders go into ant nests and they wander around in the ant nest eating ants periodically, and all the ants are like, some of us keep going missing and getting eaten. It's so strange. There's only ants down here. They don't realize that there's a spider there that looks and acts just like them. It's mimicking them, and it's preying upon them as its target. So one of the things that narcissists, sociopaths and psychopaths do is they mimic their prey, but also they mimic very elite people that they want you to think that they are. So what the word synonymization comes here. That what synonymization means is, I guess, what does it mean? Becoming so strongly associated with that people take it for granted that that's what it is. A typical example of that would be Coca-Cola. If you say Coke, someone thinks of the drink cola. Coke probably didn't invent cola, did they? There's plenty of different brands of cola. There's Pepsi Cola. But when you say Coke, people think cola because it's synonymized with cola because it's so ubiquitously advertised across the world and found everywhere. Another example is pop rivet. There are rivets, rivets are used to fasten metal together like to make an aeroplane. The big brand of rivet is Pop Rivet. So if you say Pop Rivet, people think that's a rivet. Pop is a brand. So synonymization, right? So these evil people are masters of public perception manipulation, both to make somebody look extremely bad. Usually when they're targeting you for destruction, they'll character assassinate you and they'll make you look extremely bad, even though you're not. They're experts at that. And the other thing that they do is they try and make themselves look extremely impressive, again, through manipulation of the perception of the people around them, the public, their family, their workmates, their bosses, their investors, whoever it is, they're going to manipulate those people's perceptions of them. And they do it by creating a mask of themselves, and the mask is a false self. It's not real. Behind the false self mask, there's emptiness. Please believe me, there's absolutely nothing there at all. They're empty inside. They're a black hole. They say so themselves. But the mask of perfection that they create, such as what Elizabeth Holmes was creating, dressing up like Steve Jobs and talking like William Shatner and Obama. Some people said that she talked like Darth Vader, like the baritone, saying she's got the Darth Vader voice. A lot of people are saying that her voice was creepy. A lot of people are saying, how could anyone ever fall for this? But plenty of people fell for it and gave her billions of dollars. So as part of that mask of perfection, like I said, she would dress up like Steve Jobs, and when Steve Jobs pulled something out of his jeans pocket and showed it to the audience on stage doing a product demonstration, Elizabeth Holmes would do the same thing. She'd pull something out of it, she'd fiddle around with her pants, just like with her pants pocket, just like Steve Jobs did, the exact same mannerism, the exact same behavior. She'd watched Steve Jobs, she wanted to appear like Steve Jobs, and so when Steve Jobs pulled a little gadget like an iPod Nano out of his pocket and showed it to the audience, Elizabeth Holmes would do that too with her little fraudulent gadget that she's got, piece of plastic or something. So the point is, she's exactly copying the behavior of Steve Jobs, and that is called narcissistic mimicry. And it upsets me so much that when I pointed out narcissistic mimicry to my flight sim community in 2022, not 2002, 2022, 2002 is when Elizabeth Holmes started her business. 2 years ago, when I pointed out narcissistic mimicry, a good 75% of people said that I was crazy. And of course, I was 100% spot on. I didn't know what I was looking at the time, but I was just like, well, look, I've identified this pattern here. What do you guys think? And unfortunately, most people said, oh, you're crazy, which is exactly what the narcissist wants. They want everybody to think that you're crazy. So the other important thing that she's doing there that's noteworthy with constructing a mask of perfection is she's associating herself with extremely powerful people for the street cred. So she doesn't associate really with anyone in the medical field. Even though she's working in the medical field, she doesn't associate anyone. She doesn't get like expert doctors and stuff. She gets people like Bill Clinton. She gets people like Bill Clinton. She, there's footage of her walking around her fake factory with Joe Biden. So Elizabeth Holmes is walking around her fake factory with Joe Biden. She's hanging around with Bill Clinton. So what's she doing there? She's been seen in public associating with the most powerful people in the world, the presidents of the United States. And she doesn't have any product to sell. It's all hot air. But what she's doing is the power of association. She's synonymizing herself with the most powerful people in the world, which gives her credibility. It lends her credibility. It lends her the power. All the characteristics of those powerful people rub off on her in the eyes of the public. And then people are like, wow, she knows Bill Clinton. Wow, she knows President Joe Biden. He would have been the vice president to Obama back then. And she's talking like Obama, and she's inflecting her voice when she finishes her words. So, she's copying Obama, she's hanging around with Biden, she's hanging around with Bill Clinton, blah, blah, blah. Jack Ma from Alibaba was there too on stage with her. Just really, really going all out to associate herself with extremely, extremely well-known, well-respected, Bill Clinton should be in jail. He's a total psychopath. He's a rapist, he's a murderer, he's a multi-murderer, he's a drug runner. He's a piece of crap. So, lying sociopath, probably not even human in some ways. So, the other thing is people picked up on how she had this initial association at Stanford University with George Shultz. George Shultz was some kind of a well-respected guy, but he was about 90 years old, and he had actually become sort of like infatuated. I don't know if he's infatuated, but some people were saying that she might have had some dirt on George Shultz, like she might have done something sexy with George Shultz, her being like 25 and him being like 92. She might have had something on him because his loyalty to her, even when it had been pointed out to him that she was a con artist, his loyalty was staunch. And there was another guy there at Stanford too, that when he introduced George Shultz and Elizabeth Holmes on stage to have like a chat on stage in front of an audience at Stanford, this guy was basically gushing. He was so cringe, and he was saying, "Oh, I'm so proud that I'm the one that introduced George Shultz to Elizabeth Holmes. And this was some high-powered academic professor-type guy from Stanford. So she fooled the whole room. The whole room full of Stanford high IQ experts were all of them fooled by her.
Another thing I'm very pleased with myself about is I introduced George Shultz to Elizabeth Holmes. George, take it over.
Elizabeth and I are going to have a conversation. We're going to sit over there, but let me first introduce her. Where are you? There she is. When John brought her over about 3 years ago, I looked at her and I said, well, I'm about to have a meeting with a friend of my granddaughter. As soon as she started talking, I did a double take. I subsequently learned that as a teenager, she went to China, learned Mandarin, got a degree from Peking University, got a job in Singapore helping with the SARS program, came to Stanford. As a freshman and sophomore, she's taking advanced courses in chemical engineering and electrical engineering. She's a dropout. She left after her sophomore year and started a company that now has, I think, over 800 employees. Its headquarters are right over here on Page Mill Road. She has a factory over in Newark. And as she and I have talked about what we're doing at the company, it has gradually come across to me, and maybe she was way ahead on this, that the most important thing we're working on is what you might call preventive medicine. So Elizabeth and I are now going to have a little conversation about that, and here she is, Elizabeth Holmes.
And as the guy pointed out, after the chat was over, he said, and by the way, there's 2 secretaries of state in the room, and there's 1 Marine Corps general in the room listening to this talk. So it was all about high status people being associated with her, but none of them was from the medical field. They were all from elsewhere. And so a lot of people were regarding Elizabeth Holmes' association with George Shultz as elder abuse. Like, he's clearly this old guy who's in his 90s. He's not fully, sharp and switched on anymore. And Elizabeth Holmes comes along and sweet talks him and gets him saying things like that she's the next Beethoven and that she's a once in a lifetime genius and all this kind of stuff, which she's not any of those things. She's just a con artist. So someone pointed out that George Shultz looks like the cowardly lion out of The Wizard of Oz, which I thought was pretty accurate, actually. So yeah, all these Stanford high IQ professor guys, she completely freaking tricked them. She tricked them. She conned them hook, line and sinker. They simply couldn't see how she was evil. And she is evil, and they simply couldn't see it. And that reminds me of my experience in the flight sim community when I pointed out that I took issue with a female in the flight sim community that was mimicking me. These old guys, these boomers that are running flight sim multiplayer servers or that are running forums and stuff, they couldn't see it. They wouldn't see it. They refused to see it. Like, we're talking about a high IQ room full of Stanford professors, secretaries of state, Marine Corps generals, and they couldn't see it. They couldn't see it. And so that's why the work that I do is so extremely important to the survival of the human race, because these monsters are among us and they do immense harm and damage and destruction to our society and to us. They destroy families, they destroy businesses, they destroy everything. They're destroyers. And yet all of these high IQ Stanford professors can't see it. These Marine Corps generals can't see it. These 2 secretaries of state can't see it. And in my own community, these old boomers that are running multiplayer flight sim servers and moderating forums as the community manager and all of these kinds, every single one of them, they can't see it, which provokes an anger response in me. I want to metaphorically grab them by the collar and shake them and go, listen, F-head, can't you see? Can't you see? And they can't see. They can't see. They're incapable of seeing. So even the best case scenario here is I'll get some of you to start noticing patterns of mimicry with people around you. There's always going to be one or two. Out of every 10 people, 1.5 of them is like Elizabeth Holmes. So maybe with different outward display, maybe not a female, maybe a male, maybe not with the huge Sampaku eyes, or maybe they do have the Sampaku eyes. But they've got signs and symptoms, they've got traits and characteristics, and once you know them, they're so easy to pick up on because that's all they can do. They're like these well-hidden, evil, demonic robots, and once you know their whole number, once you've got their number, there's no place for them to hide at all. And I'm telling you, look, I get frustrated, you know. I got nothing against boomers, but it's just it seems like men in general, but particularly boomers, are apt to be hideous white knights for female psychopaths. You cannot, I've experienced this a few times in my life, you cannot talk sense into a boomer man, and into most men, unfortunately, that are younger than boomers as well. You cannot talk sense into them to talk them out of being a white knight for a female psychopath. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. They're not capable of being rational and logical when it comes to a female. If you get into any kind of a dispute with a psychopathic female, the white knights will flock, will swarm to her side like a tsunami of white knights, and they will basically be the ready and willing attack dogs of her to attack you as much as possible and to destroy you. They'll do it willingly, and the idiots, they'll think that they're doing the right thing when really they're just doing the flying monkey job on behalf of a psychopath. So this is the kind of wall of ignorance that I'm facing when trying to explain to people some extremely basic things about evil. So just to recap, we've got this whole room full of Stanford scientists. Not a single one of them has been able to spot that she's a fraud. And she's got elite George Schultz on her side. And she's got that other Stanford guy on her side that said that he's so proud that he was the one that introduced her to George Schultz. And George Schultz is talking her up and saying that she's the next Beethoven and she's a once-in-a-generation genius. And she's there talking like Darth Vader, talking with a real deep voice, a baritone voice, slowing down her cadence like she's William Shatner, nodding her head like that all the time as she speaks, leaning forward and using her big Sampaku eyes and nodding her head like that all the time. That makes her hypnotic. She's doing those simple techniques. You might just think that they're a coincidence or that they're of no importance or that they're just some quirky thing that she does. No, she's actually entraining you. If you're seeing her do that, if she's speaking to you, whether you're in the audience or you're face-to-face with her in a business setting, the big eyes and the nodding of the head and leaning forward and looking at you with the big eyes and not blinking. She doesn't blink, and that's another psychopathic trait. And nodding the head all the time like that, she's actually entraining you. She's doing something to you. Psychopaths, when they communicate to you, they actually hypnotize you. So hypnotists know this, but 99.99999% of you don't know this, do you? Well, now you do. You now know that psychopaths and narcissists and sociopaths, they're evil, and when they speak to you, by default, like full time, they are hypnotizing you. So this is one of the reasons why they're so influential and so effective at manipulating people and getting otherwise smart people like a room full of Stanford professors to just be completely hypnotized by them, because they're hypnotizing them. And you might think that you're impervious to this, but they will hypnotize you. The only way you can not be hypnotized by them is to be aware of what they're doing when they're doing it, which is why I'm making this video. So you go and watch her speeches. I mean, TED Talks are ridiculously discredited by now. They have terrible people at TED Talks. Do you remember there was a psychopath from Denmark that murdered a woman in a submarine? There was a psychopath in Denmark that had a submarine, and he took a woman journalist off the coast of Denmark and then murdered her and then chopped her up and threw her in the sea. That guy also did a TED Talk a few years before that. So TED Talks don't choose very good people to be doing TED Talks. TED Talks are often having like murderous psychopaths and con artists up on stage in TED Talks. The only TED Talk that I actually respect is Sam Hyde's TED Talk, and he managed to completely troll the TED Talk, and it was the most hilarious effing thing that you'll ever see. Sam Hyde's TED Talk was genius, because he's basically pointing out, this is years ago too, he's pointing out that he can see clearly that TED Talks are complete crap, they're complete frauds. All they are is a platform for self-promoting narcissists and psychopaths and murderers and con artists and things like that. So that's TED Talks. You can see Elizabeth Holmes from 2014 onwards in a number of TED Talks doing all of her techniques on the audience. And you can see her talking like Obama. You can see her slowing her cadence down like William Shatner. She's up there, you know, in other meetings with people on stage, with Bill Clinton, with she's walking around with Joe Biden. She's got all these Stanford guys on her side. They're all these white knights that won't hear a bad word said about her. And one of the really sad things about this is that this guy that was the grandson of George Shultz went to actually work for... So George Shultz, when he retired from being a Stanford professor, he went straight across to working for Elizabeth Holmes' Theranos company. And the secret documents later revealed that he was being paid a shitload of money. He was being paid a fortune by her to be there, to be part of her company. He wasn't really doing any work. She was just paying him to get his reputation into the company, that's all. And with his reputation, she could attract more people with big reputations to join her company. Ultimately, like Henry Kissinger, for goodness sakes, gave her money. Rupert Murdoch gave her money. Walgreens gave her money. Safeway gave her money. She was trying to get associated with Pfizer, like all of this kind of stuff. She was building up this massive, huge mask of perfection of an Apple-like business that didn't actually have any substance to it. Behind the mask of perfection, the connections to Bill Clinton, the talking like Steve Jobs, behind all of that mask of perfection, which people would just mistake that for an Apple-like company. Oh, it's like Apple. Oh, how cool. Oh, it's such a good company. Oh, it's so amazing. Oh, it's so trendy. Oh, it's so popular. Everyone loves it. But what's behind it? Just like behind the mask of perfection of a psychopath, it's a black hole. There's nothing there. There's no product. There never was a product. There never was a product. This is the fundamental thing about psychopaths. They're just a mask of perfection with nothing behind them. And Theranos, the company, was a mask of perfection with no product behind it. It was empty. It had all the connections to Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, and there's a photograph, but it had no substance to it. There's a photograph for a magazine spread of a whole bunch of important movers and shakers photographed all standing or sitting together, sort of like an informal class photo. And one of them was Elizabeth Holmes, and one of them was Mark Zuckerberg. So she was being photographed in the same photo as Mark Zuckerberg when she didn't have anything. She didn't even have a product. She didn't even have a product. She had nothing. So the main point that I'm actually trying to make here is about mimicry, that Elizabeth Holmes mimicked certain people. And the second point, I guess, is that she associated herself with important people, which is a form of mimicry because she's taking on their traits by association with them. You could call it osmosis. By being close up to people like Zuckerberg, photographed in the same photo as Zuckerberg, suddenly people are thinking of her as this elite, amazing Silicon Valley software genius like Mark Zuckerberg. That's how he's portrayed to us anyway. I think he's actually a front for DARPA. DARPA started Lifebook before Facebook came along, and then they changed the name from Lifebook to Facebook, and the DARPA project called Lifebook got a front man, which was Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg is another kind of a front man. And here's the interesting thing. People say that Zuckerberg is a robot, and Zuckerberg has been caught out saying that he's not human and then quickly correcting himself. And he does have robotic mannerisms and behaviors sometimes. And people are also saying that Elizabeth Holmes resembles Zuckerberg sometimes. Sometimes her face looks similar to his. There's this theory that there are cyborgs that are being put as like front men, or I guess women, on big black black ops projects, like DARPA's projects, like Lifebook, which is Facebook, Zuckerberg certainly is. I hate to break it to you, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll probably be incredulous. My BitChute audience is a bit more hip to this stuff, but Zuckerberg didn't create anything. He's a front man. He's a front man. He doesn't. He's just an actor that was chosen to be in front of this giant, big spying effort by the American establishment called Lifebook, which they changed the name to Facebook. And they've got Zuckerberg there as the front man. So Zuckerberg could well be some kind of a synthetic human. And if you think that that's outlandish, you should see some of the footage of him, the way he does certain things. It's just not human. This is very strange. And Elizabeth Holmes is kind of like a female Mark Zuckerberg. So possibly they're both clones produced from the same source DNA. If you've ever seen those comparisons of Hollywood people to other Hollywood people or to people from the past, you're just like, what the hell's going on here? Like Michael J. Fox and another guy, they look exactly the same. Benicio del Toro and Brad Pitt seem to have some genetic similarity. They're racially different, but they have a genetic similarity. Eddie Murphy and some guy from a black and white photo, they look exactly the same. Ellen DeGeneres and some Edgar Allan Poe or someone, some ancient American writer, black and white photo, they look the same. So there's just a massive amount of Hollywood stars that could well have been cloned from a similar origin. So, but yeah, just back to the psychopath traits awareness. The big one is mimicry. So they're always trying to mimic their target, like the spider and the ants. And that's what happened to me. I was mimicked by a predatorial female psychopath. And she wasn't mimicking me, I don't think, because she wanted to be like me. I could be wrong. That would be flattering, but I don't think so. I think mostly she was mimicking me because she wanted to, like a predator, she wanted to entrain me and get me hypnotized and then destroy me by sucking all of the energy out of me. So that's what they're after. They're after your energy. Elizabeth Holmes too, what was she after? She was after your energy. She wanted your eyeballs on her. She wanted the whole world's eyeballs on her. She wanted the narcissistic supply. And she wanted the duper's delight to trick people and to get the delight, the sadistic delight from tricking people and conning people. So they really enjoy doing evil. But yeah, just the mimicry, how she's copying people that she wants to be associated with, and how psychologically the public then doesn't realize that she's copying Obama's way of speaking or anything like that. They don't realize that she's a fraud that's associating herself with presidents to get the clout. All they see is like this perfect Steve Jobs, you go girl, pretty blonde woman that's like Steve Jobs, and they just think, wow, she's so amazing. It's all a mask of perfection, and it's all mimicry of either the target to be destroyed, or it's mimicry of elite people to be synonymized with, so that everybody through the mimicry comes to see her as this perfect elite powerful person that has all these powerful connections, that is so powerful, that is such a genius. She wants the public to think of her as Steve Jobs, and she did a very good job of convincing the public that she was Steve Jobs.
The day I've been looking forward to for 2.5 years. Every once in a while, a revolutionary product comes along that changes everything. And Apple has been, well, first of all, one's very fortunate if you get to work on just one of these in your career. Apple's been very fortunate. It's been able to introduce a few of these into the world. In 1984, we introduced the Macintosh. It didn't just change Apple, it changed the whole computer industry. In 2001, we introduced the first iPod. And it didn't just change the way we all listen to music. It changed the entire music industry. Well, Today, we're introducing 3 revolutionary products of this class. The first one is a widescreen iPod with touch controls. The second is a revolutionary mobile phone. An iPod, a phone. Are you getting it? These are not 3 separate devices. This is one device. And we are calling it iPhone. Today, Apple is going to reinvent the phone.
You've said that the journal's reporting on Theranos has been erroneous and, quote, grounded in baseless assertions. Could you get specific on the key points today, and starting with whether you're now at the point where you're only testing for one thing, herpes, using your proprietary technology? Is that correct?
It's not correct. And there's a lot of different elements of our work that have been conflated through these 2 pieces. The decision that we made to voluntarily submit all of our tests and test systems to FDA meant that we have to move as a company from the lab framework and quality systems to the FDA framework and quality systems. And our specific recent announcements around what we're doing with our nanotainer tube have to do only with the tube that we use to collect capillary or finger stick blood, and the decision that we made to take those tubes through the FDA clearance process. We've submitted all of our filings around those nanotainer tubes. That nanotainer was actually cleared by the FDA for use with our devices and software and first test that we took through the FDA for HSV. And now we're taking it through for use with any combination of tests. So once you submit those submissions, at a certain point, if you're going to transition from operating under the CLIA lab framework to the FDA framework to be compliant with the use of those nanotainers as an FDA-regulated device, you have to move to the FDA quality systems. And that's what we've just done.
So, but at this moment in time then, you're not using those nanotainers for anything except the herpes test.
The nanotainers, you said technology initially, and Theranos has a lot of other technology, which is our devices and software and chemistries that have nothing to do with the decision to transition the tube.
So are you testing for other medical conditions using Edison?
So Edison is a code name that we had for one of our earliest versions of our devices. Theranos has many proprietary devices that we develop and manufacture ourselves. What is being referred to as Edison is one of them. Okay. And so we don't actually use the technology that's being referred to as Edison for anything, and haven't for a few years now.
So if I went to one of the centers and I got a pinprick, and I only gave that much blood, right? What tests are you currently able to perform for that blood using anything other than commercially available lab equipment?
So we have never used commercially available lab equipment for finger stick based tests. Okay. Every finger stick test that we have ever done uses proprietary Theranos technology that is not commercially available.
Okay.
Right now, because we're at a moment in time in which we've decided to transition from the lab framework to the FDA framework. I think about this kind of like if you have cars driving on a road and you say, okay, I'm going to take everybody from driving on the right-hand side of the road to the left-hand side of the road. The only way to do that is to pause right?
Okay.
Cut over. And so as a result, because we have voluntarily decided not to use our nanotainer tubes until we cut over to the left-hand side of the road, which we now have the FDA quality systems in place to do this, we are not collecting the finger stick sample for anything except for HSV. That has nothing to do with what we can run on our devices in our lab. It has nothing to do with our tests. It has nothing to do with our testing methodology or the accuracy or performance of it.
She wants them to think that she's, again, it's all subconscious. It's subconscious entraining, hypnotizing and manipulation of you. So when I explain it to you, you might think, oh, that's bullshit. I can tell that she's not a black man. I can tell that she's not a bum. It's not like that. She's doing something to you, subconscious, that you're not aware that she's doing to you until I come along and tell you. So the way she's inflecting her uptick of her speech at the end of her words, she's copying Obama. And she does it so subtly. She's not doing it thick and fast. She's not laying it on thick. She's not doing it so much that it looks like she's just parodying Barack Obama. It's just that in certain circumstances, she'll draw on a library of people that she's mimicking, and she'll infuse their way of speaking into her way of speaking. And on the subject of like elder abuse and George Shields, George Shields' grandson went to work for her company, and he quickly realized that things didn't add up and that she was a fraud, and he started asking questions, and I think he blew the whistle. And when he did that, she tried to destroy George Shields' grandson. And George Shields' grandson got legally threatened by her lawyer, and her lawyer was the best lawyer in America. Can't remember his name, but in other words, if you go up against him in a court of law, you're going to be bankrupt. Like, if you had $1 million, suddenly you're bankrupt. It's that kind of thing. And that's just to defend your name. That's not to, like, bring justice to her. That's just to defend your name so that she doesn't put you in jail for 50 years. Something like that. So this young guy, he was really in danger. She was triangulating legal authorities and all of these high clout, important Stanford men and so on against him, the grandson of George Shields, who would have been in his early 20s. He had to actually get George Shields' children, like his parents, to mortgage their house. They had to take out a $400,000 mortgage on their house to pay the legal fees for the lawyers to defend him against Elizabeth Holmes. And remember, George Shields is like in his 90s and his grandson's in his 20s. And at one point, George Shields, ever loyal to this bitch, triangulated the grandson and got him to come over to his house. George Shields did. Got his grandson to come over and then ambushed him with lawyers that he didn't tell the grandson were there. Lawyers from Elizabeth Holmes, who stuck all this paperwork in front of him and said, you've been served or something like that, and here's a restraining order on you like you're a criminal or something, and sign here and blah, 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 and sign this what do you call it, a non-disclosure agreement where you're not allowed to say anything. So, and it was done by trickery, actually. George Shields, this guy that's loyal to Elizabeth Holmes, he actually became a con artist for her. That's why people are suspecting that she had some dirt on him, like maybe sexual blackmail, because he was loyal to her to the end, even when it had been pointed out to him, obviously, that you're white knighting for a female psychopath. He wouldn't listen. And I've had that same experience in the flight sim community. These old men, they're white knighting for a female psychopath, and I'm telling them, hey, look, you're harming me on behalf of a female psychopath. They won't listen. They won't listen. It's the most frustrating thing in the world. So George Shields said to his grandson, come over to my house, and just for something simple like I can't remember what it was. I think it might have been for the non-disclosure agreement, and the grandson agreed. And then when he got over there for the non-disclosure agreement, that was just going to be, he really just wanted to talk to his grandpa face to face, really. So he wanted to talk to his grandpa face to face. He had no idea that there was going to be an ambush of these lawyers. So he's talking to his grandpa face to face about all the Elizabeth Holmes fraud and everything. And then suddenly out of the blue, and he said that the grandpa said, yeah, there's just like one page that I want you to read. And so he's like, yeah, sure, one page, no problem. So he comes over, and then suddenly George Shields is dumping like 1,000-page document on him and telling him to sign it. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, out of nowhere, these two lawyers from Theranos walk in the door, and George Shills has had them in his house all this time without telling his grandson, and ambushes the grandson, and they pressure the grandson to sign that 1,000-page long document. And you can just see real triangulation going on here, and real flying monkey behavior going on here from George Shills against his own flesh and blood on behalf of this female psychopath con artist. It makes my blood boil. It really makes my blood boil. White knights as well. George Shills is white knighting for Elizabeth Holmes against his own grandson. So there's people on earth that irritate me the most right now, and that's white knights for female psychopaths, because they're just detestable, vile scum, basically. They're like anti-community, anti-human, pro-evil, and the worst thing is that they think that they're perfect people. It's the most disgusting, and makes you want to vomit. The behaviour of George Shills towards his grandson makes me want to vomit. Ambushing him with Theranos lawyers in his own house and everything. Telling him, oh yeah, it's just going to be a one-page document for you to sign about an NDA. Turns out it's like, 1,000 pages or something, and it's all this stuff about, oh, actually, here's a restraining order on you. They were serving the grandson with a restraining order as though he was a criminal. So just so much legal warfare pressure put on the grandson when he tried to blow the whistle, when he tried to alert people, including his own grandpa, about the horrible, evil, criminal behaviour of Elizabeth Holmes, her partner in crime, Sonny Balwani, who I'd get so mad I don't even want to talk about that right here. Check out my BitChute video for full expansion on that subject. But yeah, George Shills triangulated authority and legal power against his own grandson on behalf of this psychopath. All right, so that just shows you the hypnotism that she has George Shills under, as well as the blackmail, that he's a full-on loyal white knight to this evil witch. And that gives you a small insight into the shenanigans of psychopaths. And what do they look like? Do they look like a horrible monster that's disfigured or something? Do they look like an evil man or something? Often they're like a cute girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, with some quirky characteristics like a deep voice, and she talks like Obama, and she dresses and does the body movements of Steve Jobs, and that's your psychopath right there. That's your destroyer. So, yeah. So, mimicry. Please understand, primary characteristic that you can get to know when you've got one around you of a narcissist, a sociopath, or a psychopath, which are all evil. Primary characteristic of evil is mimicry. They mimic their target that they're going to destroy, and they mimic the people that they want you to think that they are, so that you think that they are the people that they're mimicking. And again, you might be thinking, oh no, I know that she's not William Shatner, but it's subconscious. I know that she's not a black man, but she is subconsciously influencing you. That, remember how popular Obama was in the beginning? Super popular, and then she's copying his method of speaking, and that rubs his super popularity at the time onto her in your subconscious mind. You don't even know that she's doing it unless you've studied psychopaths like I have, and you can spot the patterns of their behavior, of mimicry. So it's not just the voice and how they speak, it's not just how they dress, it's absolutely everything. Like, even Elizabeth Holmes mimicked Apple, Steve Jobs' company Apple, by, as soon as she had some inflow of investor cash from like Henry Kissinger and that, from like Rupert Murdoch and that. Rupert Murdoch, the billionaire Australian that owns the New York Times and everything like that, owns Fox News, he gave her $100 million. He was so tricked by her, and he's an evil bastard. It's hard to trick someone like that. He was so tricked by her, he gave her $100 million. So what she did with all that money is she went straight away to Apple staff who work for Apple, or who used to work for Apple, and she hired all of the people that worked for Steve Jobs at Apple to come and work for her. the right-hand man of Steve Jobs, she hired that man. The number 2 man in all of Apple, the man that was closest to Steve Jobs, she hired him to work for her company. The person who was the head of the design department that designed the appearance of the first iPhone, that person was hired by Elizabeth Holmes to come and work for Theranos. So what's she doing there? Why is she so fixated on getting Apple staff to come and work for her? It's because she's trying to synonymize Theranos with Apple. She's trying to, through osmosis, she's trying to merge Apple with Elizabeth Holmes, merge Apple with Theranos, merge Steve Jobs and the iPhone and the iPod and the iPad and all of the amazing clout, the brilliance and the popularity of the Apple products. She's very hard trying to merge that with Elizabeth Holmes and with Theranos. This is mimicry on a industrial, grand, fraudulent scale. I hope you can see that this is mimicry. What she's doing is she's mimicking Apple and she's mimicking Steve Jobs to the point that she's becoming Steve Jobs, and her company Theranos is becoming Apple. How do you turn one company into another company? Just for the sake of the argument, supposing there was 100 people that worked for a company that you wanted to mimic, what better way than to turn your company into that company than simply offering to hire all of those people into your company? So you get those 100 people, for the sake of the argument, to come over and work for your company. Suddenly you've mimicked their company so hard that all of their people are now working for you. And what's the substance of a company? It's the people that work for it. So that's how you can body snatch by mimicry. It's a body revenge of the body snatchers or something, right? She's a body snatcher. She's snatching the body of Steve Jobs, and she's snatching the substance of the company Apple by getting the Apple people to come and work for her, even though she doesn't have a product. That's mimicry. But it goes further than just like, you know, than just mimicry on... Listen, there's a lot of deep reasons why psychopaths mimic people. It's to entrain, it's to hypnotize. But a lot of it too is that they want to become something very successful. And I've noticed in the flight sim community, one popularity specialist, expert at getting popularity, psychopath, showed up a couple of years ago, and there was a really popular multiplayer server called the Cold War server, and I used to play on that Cold War server all the time. It doesn't exist anymore, or if it does, it doesn't have any players. I think it was out of action for a few years, and now it's back, but it's not as popular as it used to be, because all of the players have been stolen by this psychopath who came along, and he saw how popular the Cold War server was, and what he did was he exactly copied the software of the Cold War server, and then he stuck his, and the title of the server, the only difference is that he stuck his, he made a mirror image of, again, mimicry, of the Cold War server, and the only difference is he stuck his name on the front of the title of the Cold War server. So it was his Cold War server, and that was the only difference. And then he heavily promoted the Cold War, his Cold War server, by doing interviews with the executive producers of video games. So he's shamelessly sucking up to anybody in positions of power or influence or popularity in the community, including myself, which I rejected. I could see that he was sucking up to me, and I was like, no, thank you. I'm not interested in having anything to do with you. I didn't say it like that. I was polite, but point is, he went and spoke to the most high-powered elite people that he could find, sucked up to them, got public interviews with them that he could put onto his YouTube channel, and that helped him to promote his multiplayer server. The existing original Cold War server was very popular. It had a lot of players on it. Suddenly, all of those players were enticed over to his Cold War server, and the original Cold War server failed, and he took over all of that essence of the original Cold War server into his Cold War server. He'd basically done a body snatch on the original Cold War server, just like Elizabeth Holmes did on Apple. Exactly the same thing. And so what I'm describing here, if you haven't figured it out yet, is that psychopaths are like these machines, and they're all the same. They're all the same. Doesn't matter whether they're male or female, or in this country or that, or speaking this language or that. It's the same damn machine. It's the same damn demon. They're all the same, and their behaviors are all the same. they have sets of behaviour. I mean, there's different types of psychopath. The one that I'm talking about, that this guy that stole the Cold War server and put his name on it, and he's identical to Elizabeth Holmes. They're a certain kind of psychopath. I'd call them the popularity-seeking psychopath, the popularity expert psychopath. So their number one thing that they're doing is seeking popularity in a community. There's other psychopaths that seek other things. There's psychopaths that don't want to be popular so much. What they really want is they want to be having a different kind of power. They want political power as opposed to the high esteem of the masses. So there's ones that just go after political power in an organizational structure. Like you'll see a lot of sociopaths. They're quite quiet people, but they somehow climb through the corporate hierarchy power structure of a corporation or a government, and you hardly know that they're there. Like Stalin was like that. Joseph Stalin was like that. You hardly knew that he was there, but suddenly he was in political power over everybody and everything. So there's different types of psychopath. Then, of course, there's the violent ones that are just purely violent. Then there's the serial killer ones. There's all different types of psychopath. But the one that we're talking about here with Elizabeth Holmes, just like this guy in the flight sim community that stole the Cold War server, put his name on it, did interviews with executive producers of video games to promote his YouTube channel and his server. And suddenly, I mean, look, if there was a Cold War server, why did it need someone to come along and make exactly the same thing? It already existed. We didn't need another one. So it's just tragic, the first one failed after it was basically hijacked and mimicked and stolen by this psychopath that rocked up out of nowhere. That's a popularity-seeking psychopath, and it's exactly the same as Elizabeth Holmes. Elizabeth Holmes, this popularity-seeking psychopath, the whole almost 20 years of her company from the early 2000s, about 2003, up to about middle of 2018, almost 20 years, the whole effort that she was doing there was gaining popularity for herself. That's it. Seeking to be associated and synonymized with the highest popularity and powerful people that she can find, such as Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Henry Kissinger, Rupert Murdoch, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg. You name it, she's trying to be synonymized with these extremely impressive, high-status, multi-billionaire type people. And another thing is, why did she choose Sunny Balwani, like Ramesh Balwani, 40 years older than her, a Pakistani? Why on earth would she have chosen him, of all the men in the world? Well, because when she met him, he was a millionaire and he had $40 million that he just made in startups in Silicon Valley. So there was that. But also, Sunny Balwani, Ramesh Balwani, was working with early Microsoft and with, do you remember Lotus? Microsoft had Lotus Suite or Suite. It was like word processing. It's kind of like Microsoft Word. So there was Lotus, like Lotus Notes and all that. Sunny Balwani was working with Lotus and Microsoft, and actually knew Bill Gates in the early days of Microsoft. Now you're getting a picture now, aren't you? So Elizabeth Holmes, remember I told you that when she was a girl, the neighbour of her and her family, her mum, dad and her brother and her, the neighbour was a doctor, and the doctor was very wealthy, he was very rich, he was very successful, because he was a doctor who owned several medical device companies that made him lots of money, and his bank account was full of money. Although Elizabeth Holmes' father was rich, compared to, say, me, Elizabeth Holmes' father was jealous of this doctor that owned all of the medical device companies because he was way more successful than Elizabeth Holmes' father. So Elizabeth Holmes grew up in this environment, and she saw that medical science companies made success, and as a sociopath she wanted to be successful, and so she saw the material success would come from medical device companies, startups as well. So fast forward to when she meets Ramesh Balwani. He's already got the proof is in the pudding. He's already succeeded materially. He's got $40 million, so he must be successful. So you would think that a blonde girl would turn her nose up at a Pakistani man that's 40 years old when she's 20 years old. But as a sociopath, they only care about material success, and she can see the traits and the characteristics of the success of Sunny Balwani. Most of it's just luck, being in the right place at the right time, but she thought, well, he's got everything that I'm aspiring to have myself, and so she latched onto him for that reason. So remember how we looked at how Elizabeth Holmes is connected in Theranos, connected to all these high-profile elite people such as Bill Clinton, Mark Zuckerberg, Joe Biden, etc., etc., etc. Henry Kissinger. It doesn't get more elite than that. And think back to what she saw at the age of 19 in Sunny Balwani. She saw a connection, a real-life, tangible connection to Bill Gates. And to her, that's cha-ching, that's what she's looking for. She's looking for those, she wants to associate with important people. And if she can't associate with important people, she wants to associate with the people who themselves have previously associated with important people. So she knows that Ramesh Balwani has this real-life connection to Bill Gates. No matter how remote that was, that to her was something extremely important. So it's all about the power connections. And it's all about the startup track record of having... See, Ramesh Balwani's startup company, which he sold and got $40 million for, it would never have made a product. Just like Theranos, it would never have made a product. Today, it wouldn't even exist. And needless to say, that whole exercise in that startup tech company in Silicon Valley, started by Ramesh Sunny Balwani in 1999, sold in 1999, at the end of the tech boom. He was just in the right place at the right time. His company was an exercise in wasting everybody's time. It made no profit, it made no product, and yet it made $40 million for him and got him connections with Bill Gates and things like that. So this is what Elizabeth Holmes saw in Ramesh Balwani, is these kinds of things that she was hoping to achieve herself. Psychopaths put people into two categories, those that they can exploit and those that they see as equals to them or that are above them that they can learn from. And she put Balwani, even though he's so grotesque, she put him in this category as a psychopath that she was, of someone that she can learn from. That's why she latched onto him. That's what they do. I've seen it before. I've seen it in the flight sim world. And so a psychopath will latch onto someone that they think is better than them, that they can learn from, or that they can get material success or power connections from. They can get something from them, but not so much in an exploitative way, but more in a worshipping kind of a way. Strange thing, isn't it? They're sadomasochistic, so they're either exploiting you by treating you sadistically, causing you pain for their pleasure, or they're masochistically worshipping someone above them that they perceive as above them. Their value systems are completely different to human being value systems. They're basically completely material and power focused. Okay, so there's that. So the other thing is the machine it's not even a machine. It's just a con artist box of nothingness. Might as well be an empty tissue box. The device that she called the Edison device was at the heart of her company, and of course it didn't even do anything. It was a fraudulent thing. It was fake. The Edison device was so grandly named, was their black box device, their Apple computer, their Apple Macintosh, their IBM compatible, was was their iPod, their brand. It's like Apple produces the iPod, Theranos produces the Edison machine. So the Edison machine is like their big consumer product gizmo that they're hoping to sell to the world as this amazing brand new technology. So the interesting thing with that is, again, it's empty inside. It's a black hole inside, just like her heart and soul. Black hole, nothing there, no substance. The Edison machine, nothing there, no substance. It's just a thing that looks like a thing, but it doesn't do anything. But it's been given this grand name to mimic and to associate scientific research and development and innovation, genius and success of Thomas Edison. Everybody can, in the entire United States and most of the world, can rapidly identify, certainly everybody in science, can rapidly identify Edison, the name Edison. It's associated with the light bulb, it's associated with radios, with General Electric and Westinghouse. It's just this genius name from early America scientific discovery and achievement. Edison, Thomas Edison, associated with Tesla as well. You can see that Elon Musk has peculiarly done the same thing. He's called his company Tesla, named after Nikola Tesla. So Elizabeth Holmes named her alleged consumer product the Edison machine, and what she's doing there is it's mimicry of somebody who achieved greatness, and again trying to morph all of the quality, a bit like a cannibal. A cannibal is said to eat the enemy warriors that they fought in battle in order to take on the qualities of the enemy warriors that they fought in battle, that they slain, but that had good fighting abilities. Cannibals would most prize the strongest warrior from their enemy that they defeated. In the same way, the sociopath, the psychopath, they find the highest achieving people or companies or the most successful things or people out there, and then they seek to name their things or their companies or themselves exactly the same as those high achieving people or successful things. And that's why she has mimicked Edison and by osmosis associated her name and her company's name with the high and mighty name of Thomas Edison, by calling this completely empty black box, black hole, fraudulent non-gizmo the Edison machine, the Edison device. So there's that. So psychopaths and sociopaths and that, they're fake. They're so totally fake, but their fakeness is so totally convincing. It's the same as in the realm of high value items, usually clothing. There's an industry of fakes, usually coming out of like Asia somewhere, China or somewhere. And the fakes are often so good that they're indistinguishable from the real thing, often. Not always, but often. So like fake sports shoes, fake high-end garments, clothing, pieces of clothing. Most of the time fakes, you can tell they're fake because they're just not as, the quality's not as good. But like for example, just say a real Hugo Boss jumper, sweater, might be made of 100% alpaca or 100% cashmere. It's a type of wool that's very expensive because it's a finite resource. Whereas a fake Hugo Boss jumper might look exactly the same, but if you did the burn test on a little bit of inconspicuous yarn or wool off of the garment, you'd find that when it burnt, it smelt like plastic, which means it's made of polyester or something like that, and it's a fake, even though they looked rather the same. So, whereas if you do the burn test on the alpaca hair or the cashmere, it just smells a bit like burning hair, which means it's genuine. So the point I'm making is that fakes can appear extremely authentic. Just there's little tests you can do to determine if it really is authentic or not, and sometimes it's not. With the personality of like sociopath, narcissist, psychopath, it can appear like a genuine personality, but like extremely authentic appearing down to the nth degree. You can just be completely convinced that this is an authentic person, but it's actually kind of like a construction. It's a product that they've produced as a mask of perfection. So the public and outward facing appearance of the sociopath is a mask of perfection, as I've discussed earlier. But then they have an ulterior personality. They're Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. They have a good and a bad side, so to speak, and all of their socially unacceptable things are in their covert personality that really only certain people get to see, such as their victim. So oftentimes the victim will have this personality revealed to them, this sordid, disgusting personality that's the antithesis of the publicly stated values of the sociopath. So everybody sees the sociopath as a perfect person because they've only seen the public personality. But the target of the sociopath gets to see another side of the sociopath and realize that they're evil, that they're a sociopath. And that side of them is just like disgusting. It's hideous. And then, of course, the target of the victim of the sociopath goes to public and tells everybody, hey, look, this person's not who you think they are. And because the public-facing persona is so authentic seeming, nobody believes the victim. Happens over and over again. Happened to me. So with Elizabeth Holmes, it's kind of like that. So these two, what would you call it, a dipolar personality or something? It's literally a split personality. It's a multiple personality where the person has two distinct personalities. One of them is public and one of them is hidden. The public personality always disavows any association or any existence of their secret personality, as though they didn't even know that the secret personality existed. Their shutting down of anyone suggesting that they're anything other than their public-facing mask of perfection is like extremely proactive. They take strong measures to shut down anyone that would seek to expose their hidden second personality. The classic example that I know of, that I've experienced myself, is that I know of a content creator that's very famous and he's very anti-homosexual, but his private, secret, second personality is incredibly gay. And the only difference there is that in his public persona, he's very outspoken as an anti-gay and constantly, without being asked to, constantly telling people that he's not gay. But then in his second personality, he's gay. He's incredibly gay. Two distinct personalities. And so if you look at the public persona, you can kind of see it, but it's more like you're looking at a church pastor or minister talking about homosexuality to denounce it. But then the secret personality is talking about homosexuality because that's what they are. So this is the duality of sociopaths. They're all like this. They all have these two personalities, one public, one private, that they only show to their targets, their victims. And it's really bizarre, isn't it? But it's true. Like, they've got these two distinct personalities that are polar opposites. They're 180 degrees going in the different directions. One is black, one is white, one is yin, one is yang. You know, so usually the public-facing persona is really wholesome and good, and usually the hidden one is really bad. Although in my experience, I've known a hidden one. It's hard to explain which one is the good one. They kind of morph into each other. But in another example, not the one I just mentioned, a female this time, her hidden persona was basically extremely young, like a 2-year-old child, very playful, very innocent, very cheeky, mischievous, fun-loving. And then her public persona was very businesslike and cold-hearted. And unfortunately, the public persona never acknowledged the existence of the second personality, the hidden personality that I knew. And she also projected this onto me in an argument. She said to me something like, you have two personalities, or do you have two personalities? So she latched onto a comment that I'd made off the cuff. We were talking in public, so there was like 60 other people watching. And so I said we, as in obviously referring to me plus everybody else that was watching this argument. I said, I didn't say us, didn't say we, I said us. I said, can you give us an answer to my question? And she latched onto that comment and she said, us? What do you mean us? Do you have multiple personalities? And at the time I didn't understand what was going on. I didn't know she was a narcissist. I just thought it was hilarious that she would speak that way. She was so hostile and so over the top. But she really does have an us. She has an us. She has her public self and her private self that she reveals only to her targets in her capacity as a psychopath or sociopath or whatever. So Elizabeth Holmes is a little bit like this. She is like this. She has the secret persona that is always lying, cheating, stealing, making shit up, doing fraud, and that's a true persona, but it's completely divorced from the public persona. The public persona is as though it doesn't even know that the private one exists. And the public persona of Elizabeth Holmes is very idealistic, always talking about the future, talking about trying to achieve dreams and bring great dreams into existence that can help everybody, like selfless dreams and desires and stuff. A very upstanding, very impressive, very good person. And then in private, she's forging documents that fraudulently and dishonestly say that her company is associated with Pfizer, which it wasn't, or fraudulently making up test results that never existed, that showed successful test results when there were never any successful test results. Her private self, the one that would only show itself to the victim, was doing all this dishonesty, just blatantly lying about everything. And then her public self was the complete opposite, just totally like open and approachable and nice and good and kind-hearted and just the best person you've ever met. So I can see from my experience of sociopaths, and I can see the same pattern of behavior of the two personalities, the perfect public personality and the private, disgusting gremlin personality of the sociopath. I've seen it in ones that I've encountered myself, and I can see it in Elizabeth Holmes.